She was very brave. She almost defied tradition.
She made her own rules. She didn't obey anybody else's orders, and that of course got her into a lot of trouble.
Fatima was a controversial figure, and people tried to iron her out.
My mother was quite fearless. She had enormous moral courage.
There's nothing that she couldn't do.
To me, she was that unrecognized icon.
August 21st, 1976. Alone in my cell, I dressed and examined my new lodgings. My cell was small but clean. There were 2 sleeping mats on the floor. It was midwinter and very cold. The cell felt even colder. I was exhausted and I developed a splitting headache. The cold from the floor penetrated through the mats and felt as if it was biting into my very bones.
كانت فاطمة مير مجاهدة دؤوبا من أجل الحرية وكاتبة وعالمة اجتماع، وكانت أيضا صديقة مقربة من نيلسون مانديلا وعضوة نشطة من النخبة السياسية التابعة للمؤتمر الوطني الإفريقي، الحزب الذي قاد جنوب أفريقيا إلى الديمقراطية. ولكن اليوم بعد 20 عاما من الحرية لا يكاد اسم فاطمة يذكر وخبت ذكراها. ترى لماذا؟ تعد ديربان إحدى أكبر المدن في جنوب إفريقيا، وهي أيضاً المدينة التي تعيش فيها أكبر جالية من الهنود المقيمين خارج الهند على مستوى العالم. في حقبة الاستعمار البريطاني لجنوب إفريقيا انتقل الكثير من العمال الهنود إلى هنا.
Well, the genesis of that is the indentured system. The Zulu kingdom had not been defeated. There was a dearth of labor, and the British looked, slavery had ended, and the British looked to other parts of the world where they had hegemony to get people to come to labor.
Indians had come to South Africa as indentured laborers because the local Zulus would not work on the sugarcane fields. Some settler communities followed, and so a very huge Indian population was located around Durban.
My mother's father, Musamir, was born in India, in Surat, which is in Gujarat. He came to South Africa in the early 1900s as a young man. He came as what was known as a passenger Indian, as opposed to Indians who came here as indentured labourers.
My father came to South Africa as a young boy, and he then married my mother number one in India, and her name was Khatija. Then there was my mother number two. She was here from South Africa. When you read about my sister's book too regarding Fatima, she said she was told, but we cannot say for sure, that there was Jewish parentage, her father, and there was Portuguese.
I had a grandfather and two grandmothers because she was his second wife, and Rachel Farrell had transformed into Amina. The family then set up home in Durban and they moved around the Durban area.
M.I. Mir, he had his own newspaper.
It was the Indian Views, my father's publication. Although not a politician himself, wrote a lot about politics, he was very close to the politicians of the day. I suppose with that type of background, we were all greatly influenced by my father.
Oh, that's her, the first 17 years old. I think she was in matric at the time.
My mother's political activism developed during the exhilarating and politically energized era of the passive resistance campaign in 1946. The passive resistance campaign, in a nutshell, was opposition to various draconian laws which were restricting the movements of Indians at the time.
One of the things, it was a particular time in history, that it was a one time the Indian community had mobilized at a particular time when there was a spectre of the Nats coming to power. The second thing, Fatima was one of the first generation of women who were finishing high school, going on to university. And you see it in this photograph, women at the front. So women emerging as public figures. So it was both the question of her own understanding, coming from a political family, but at the same time, the timing was right.
There was a meeting, a very significant meeting at Red Square in Durban, and my mother, as a 17-year-old girl, was yanked onto a lorry and asked to address a crowd of 6,000 people. And I think that was an electric moment. That was a huge moment in her life. And after she addressed the crowd, she was asked to lead a march together with people like Monty Naika and Dr. Dadu, and the rest is history.
One of the strategies of colonialism was divide and rule. Apartheid literally inherited that and bettered it. So to a certain extent, Indians flourished relative to Africans. And those things caused divisions. When they themselves became employers, which is a natural outcome of capitalist relations.
في عام 1946 عندما تفاقم التوتر بين هنود دربن والسكان الأفارقة وتحول إلى عنف، ساعدت فاطمة على إنشاء جمعية دربن النسائية بهدف جمع النساء الهنديات والإفريقيات معا ضد نظام الفصل العنصري. وأصبحت هذه أول منظمة نسائية في البلاد تضم في عضويتها نساء إفريقيات وهنديات.
She did not believe in separate development. She did not believe in separating people according to race. But also, as a sociologist and as a human being, acknowledged that people had certain genetic origins, cultural origins, and you couldn't deny those, but they did not separate you from the rest of mankind.
September 14th, 1976. I am writing you a letter today. I wrote you one yesterday. I feel I am here, absolved of all responsibility, and you in that wild, uncomfortable world, pressurized from all sides and killing yourself with anxiety. You must relax now, worry less, so that you may live longer, so that we may be together longer.
You see, my father, number one, was a very, very liberal Muslim. Fatima goes to University of Wits when she finishes a matric. Unheard of. No father would send his daughter to Johannesburg when we are living here in Durban because of the bad influences there in Johannesburg.
وفي جامعة جوهانسبرغ تعرفت فاطمة إلى ابن عمها إسماعيل مير بصورة أعمق، ووقع كل منهما في غرام الآخر.
He was a man about town, a very beautiful looking man, a man who was at home, you know, in mass meetings, and tall and educated and you know, contemporary of Mandela and J.N. Singh and Walter Sisulu and Yusuf Dadoo.
Nelson Mandela and my late brother-in-law Ismail Mir, we used to live together.
تزوجت فاطمة وإسماعيل مير في مارس من عام 1951، وأثمرت علاقتهما إنجاب 3 أطفال هم شامين وشهناز ورشيد.
I was introduced to her as a young girl long before I got married. When I met Madiba, one of his greatest friends was Fatima and her husband.
He was at that time on the executive of the Transvaal Indian Congress. The role that I.C. Mir also played in changing the ANC's idea. They were really thinking in terms of Africa for Africans, and you know, ANC must remain as an African organization, whereas these people said, look, we can work together.
عادت فاطمة إلى دربن لإكمال دراستها في جامعة كوازولو ناتال، فحصلت على شهادة الماجستير. وفي عام 1956 أصبحت أول امرأة من المجتمع الإفريقي والهندي تلقي محاضرات في جامعة من جامعات البيض بجنوب إفريقيا.
The association that Prof. Mir and I had spanned over 20 years. And it was more like a mother-son relationship that I had with her.
How are you? Good morning. Nice to see you all in flesh.
Fatima, Mir and I met by chance. I used to be a school teacher. And in the 1980s, it was difficult being a teacher because you were told what to teach and how to teach it. And I quit teaching. And Prof. Mir was offering extramural lessons, extra classes to matriculants from African schools. And I applied for a job, got a job teaching African matriculants English. Prof. Mir found that as an academic, blacks in our country were not telling our story. We were not telling our story. Our story was being told by others, the way they perceived our lives to be. As a result, she started the Institute for Black Research in 1976, a research organization, and the trustees of the institute were herself as director, Judge Square was the president, Professor Dasta Chetty, Professor Paulus Zulu, Mama Winnie Mandela.
It was her passion. She lived for that, and it was her own creation. And it was part of the process of uplifting and empowering our people.
We were both members of the Institute for Black Research, which she had founded as an institute for training black researchers. She had come to realize the inequity in the distribution of research talents in the country.
And she wrote quite a number of books and articles trying to put across a message about what was truly going on in apartheid South Africa.
One of Prof. Meer's foremost publications and most interesting was the authorized autobiography of our former President Mandela. This is the first, I think the only authorized biography. He's released in February 1990, but in January 1990, this book, by the way, was published in 13 different languages around the world. Hundreds of thousands of copies sold. And the proceeds, by the way, of this publication was given to the Mandela family. The book, Apprenticeship of a Mahatma, this is a very simplistic document of the life of Mahatma Gandhi in South Africa.
Very passionate about Gandhi. Her library, 3/4 of it was Gandhi.
He arrived in South Africa, a young man of 24 years of age, and he left permanently. He left South Africa, 21 years later. So a very crucial period in his life, growing up period. He stayed here in South Africa, and his transformation took place in South Africa. When Gandhiji left this place, he sent my father back to look after the place in 1918. So from 1918 onwards, our family, lived here. And my father ran the newspaper. He participated in the politics in the country. Fatima came here often on holidays. She would come and stay with us in this house. My sister would go to her place, and so we had very close contact with her and her family. My first, sort of public contact with Fatima was sometime in 1956 when our leadership were all, arrested in the 56, that famous treason trial took place, and a lot of people were detained. And that meeting was supposed to be addressed by our leadership, but they were all taken away and put in prison. So then Fatima took the stage. For me, that was like the first time I heard a woman speaking and being so powerful.
Just as Gandhi had created what they call skills training centers, craft centers, Fatima also, perhaps inspired by Gandhi, started skills training centers from as early as the 50s, 60s. Initially at the Gandhi settlement. After democracy, some 13 years or so ago, she started an organization called the Kanya Skills Training Center. Our center is there, at the top there. That's where the herb market is. You find that the location of our center, the training center, is so apt in the sense that all the informal traders that train with us sell their wares amongst the people here. Come quickly. Salmanan? Kunjan? This is a picture of a school started by one of our students. Right? What do they call it? There are about 15 students there that have trained already to train other people also.
Some of us, we don't have money. When we finish school, we don't have money to go to tertiary, and also this school here, it's been so helpful to us. We can afford to study here, to learn some skills while we don't have money to go to tertiary.
This is the legacy she's left behind, and as I stated earlier on, an inspiration I think from Gandhi. Something that she started very early in her years, and she's continuing now. And the project is running for 13 years, and I'll continue to run it in her name in perpetuity.
November 12th. I received a letter from Shanaz. She writes that examinations are over. They greatly appreciate the paintings I sent them, to her and Shamim, and they have hung them on their wall. Rashida sent me a poem dedicated to Ma.
In 1976 was a turbulent time in South Africa. My mother, my 21-year-old brother, and my brother-in-law were all simultaneously detained. It was a difficult time for the family because my sister and I were students at the time, and I remember my sister getting a phone call from my mother saying, "The police are here, they're taking me away, I'm going to be detained."
I was the first prisoner. In 1976, of course, the nationalist government of the time blamed people like myself for the uprising. But whenever I was in that kind of situation, they always dragged along Fatima. I was at the fort, what is now the Constitutional Hill. I was there for about a week. And of course, I heard my friend was in one of the cells there, and poor Fatima had not done half of the things I had done.
وفي عام 1976 اعتقلت فاطمة مير في سجن الحصن القديم بجوهانسبورغ 13 يوماً، والآن أصبح الحصن القديم المقر الجديد للمحكمة الدستورية بجنوب أفريقيا. وفي المكان نفسه اعتقلت شخصيات بارزة مثل المهاتما غاندي عام 1906 ونيلسون مانديلا عام 1962. وخلال فترة اعتقالها كتبت فاطمة مذكراتها التي صدرت لاحقا في كتاب، وتحتوي تلك المذكرات على بعض الرسوم التي تدور عن حياتها داخل السجن.
She just painted what she liked. If she found some flowers in the garden, she'd paint those. She had no special idea. She just did whatever she thought was lovely, and it usually was. Sometimes a bit wild, sometimes a little bit uncontrolled, but nonetheless full of soul, full of energy, full of heart, as she was.
Fatima was a brilliant artist, you know, but people got dragooned into becoming almost one-dimensional figures as much as they strained against it, you know. So in many senses she broke a lot of molds.
So this is the dining room, or was the dining room, where the police raided that evening when Fatima came, and we had this little dinner party for a few friends. It turned out that there were 3 people that evening who were banned, and by rights they shouldn't have been talking to each other anyway, and they certainly shouldn't have been at a gathering.
A banning order in South Africa was something that was imposed on persons who were seen as a threat to the state. The effect of a banning order was that you were restricted, you could not go to social gatherings, you could not make speeches. In effect, you couldn't be with more than one person at a time.
So all that was illegal. We still don't know what happened how the police got hold of it. Anyway, it was fine. She took charge of the situation and she said to the young Indian girl, what's a nice girl like you doing here in this organization? Of course, there's no answer to that. And then she said to the young white guy, she said, you look very nervous. Is this your first time? So he said, yes, it is actually. She said, well, don't worry. We've done this lots of times. It'll all be all right. Just enjoy it. I mean, amazing.
My mother paid very little heed to the banning order. She broke it all the time. She would disguise herself, be transported at the back of cars, lying down, and transported to areas where she wasn't supposed to be. And so she ensured that she continued to try and live a normal life and do the things she wanted to do.
Despite the various banning orders, house arrests, imprisonment in solitary confinement, charges for infringing banning orders, etc., Prof. Mir also had to endure an assassination attempt. Whoever attempted to assassinate Professor Mir came in here late one evening and rang this doorbell. This doorbell has been here forever. In the meanwhile, her housekeeper lived with them in the study, and he got to the door quicker than she did. And what would have happened is that had she gotten to the door, whoever struck that bullet from the darkness out there in the garden would have hit her directly into her head, and it would have lodged into there. And since Zwelinia got here before her, and him being taller than her, the bullet passed through his shoulder and lodged into that door frame there, making a hole in a very strong steel door frame. And the extent of the damage, if you could see the extent of the damage that was caused, would have been the security branch of the day attempting to put her away, because she was a threat to the government of the day with the noises she was making internationally and locally regarding the injustices here in the country.
أطلق سراح نيلسون مانديلا في فبراير من عام 1990، وبدأ وقتها انهيار الفصل العنصري. ومن بين الأماكن الأولى التي زارها مانديلا كان بيت فاطمة مير في ديربان. وعلى الرغم من استمرار العلاقة الوثيقة بين مانديلا وفاطمة وإخلاصها لحزب المؤتمر الوطني الإفريقي، غير أنها لم تحصل على منصب في البرلمان وظلت ناشطة سياسية.
It was 10 years ago and 2 months. This was the place where we had an Occupy against the United Nations. The first time, I think, such a big protest ever against the UN. It was led by Fatima Mir with Dennis Brutus and other local activists, and she was right out here telling the top elites, and it happened to be Mary Robinson she was most angry with. And that anger was about not letting the issue of Israelis, Zionist occupation and racism in the West Bank and Gaza and its overall discrimination get onto the agenda in the United Nations.
Mr. President, this is addressed to Mr. Mbeki. The Durban Social Forum, representing people of many lands and cultures, declares its solidarity with the forces ranged against neoliberalism and global apartheid.
If I think of where she would be wearing a shirt and out protesting, I think it's probably with this group. This is the Democratic Left Front. And this is a group that came from the urban social movements. They sing struggle songs like Fatima always did, but they change the names. So instead of apartheid, the enemy might be Jacob Zuma. And you know, she actually said that when the ANC loses the support of people in Chatsworth, shack settlements, public housing dwellers, that she would no longer support the ANC. Bonzi, Conference of Polluters, Bonzi.
Chatsworth was predominantly an Indian community created by the apartheid government in the 1950s for especially Indian people. But in the new dispensation, it's become more multiracial. Just before the 1999 elections, Fatima Mir and a group of anti-apartheid activists decided to create a group called the Concerned Citizens Group. And the intention behind this was to actually go out and get, the Indian vote for the ANC. And we found this an opportunity to actually invite this group to a public meeting. Our intention at that point in time was to actually strengthen the mobilizing within the Chatsworth area, because we knew the government will come back and impose evictions on us. And Fatima Mir's group also had an advert in the paper, the Concerned Citizens Group. We decided to invite them as well. So at this public meeting, Fatima Mir was actually the brave woman that came to this meeting, because most politicians chickened out. They didn't actually attend the meeting. And she very bravely took the mic and wanted to ask people to vote for the ANC. But before she could even say ANC, people from the audience started chanting and shouting and really verbally abusing her, asking her questions like, where were you? And we were suffering for all this time and nobody's on our side. We're facing evictions and,
When we said, how can you vote for your former oppressors? They said to us, we are not concerned about our former oppressors. We are concerned about our present oppressors. We are concerned about the ANC and about how the ANC is oppressing us. And they came up with a string of complaints against the African National Congress.
When Professor came here and she found out the issues that people were facing around the social injustices, and that's a disconnection of electricity and water, the threat of being evicted, the threat of being relocated, she started to champion the cause of the people and the cause of the poor.
Well, listening to the plight of the people on that afternoon obviously made her understand. One of our families living in a shack was actually facing the threat of being evicted that Monday morning. She was here at 8 o'clock in the morning to defend that family.
You have poor people, indigent people, impoverished people, people who haven't got food on their plates. Now you are going to take away the roof from their heads. And where do you expect these people to go? You are just compounding their indigency. The non-racial City Council of Durban is continuing the policy of the racist nationalist government, which protected whites from sharing the cost of servicing black townships. Now the poor, still predominantly African, Indian and colored, are forced to bear the entire burden of their service. And this is imposed on them unilaterally in fascist brutality.
Through her assistance and expertise, we then managed to establish what is called the Bayview Flats Residents Association. And with that, she started helping us to negotiate with the municipality. And we started to have talks with them in trying to find a way in which the people of this community in Bayview would lead a better life.
We're actually now planning to take Christina's case as a test case to our High Court, because we feel
It's a legitimate case. She needs water. She's a sick woman. She has kids in her house, and she hasn't got the money to pay because she's not even getting a state grant.
We have a Bill of Rights. You have a right to a house. You have a right to water. You see? You have a right to these basic amenities. Yeah. Thanks. Right. Okay. All right. The government can't tell us that it hasn't got the money, because we know it has got the money. What is wrong is that the government does not know how to budget.
And there's an instance where it was a few days after her triple bypass operation, released from hospital. I think it was 3 days after she was discharged from hospital. There was a crisis in Chatsworth, and she received a phone call from the residents stating that the municipal security was there evicting the people. And she had a driver then, she summoned the driver and stormed off to Chatsworth in a very, very ill state, but she had to be there with the people. And her husband called, to the office and found out from me, where is Prof? So I had to lie to him that she is gone to the doctor for a checkup. In the meanwhile, Prof Mir was in Chatsworth marching.
She would go, and then my poor father would read about it in the paper the next day. She would say, no, I'm going to be at home all day. And then he would say, you said you were going to be at home, but look at this, So she was a wild card.
بعد أن ظل إسماعيل رفيق سفر مانديلا وكاتب خطبه، وبعد أن انضم إلى حكومة المقاطعة، توفي إسماعيل عام 2000 من دون أن ينتهي من كتابة سيرته الذاتية، فتعهدت فاطمة باستكمالها نيابة عنه.
At his funeral, the premier of the province, because Ismail was also a member of parliament, provincial parliament, described him as a peacemaker.
My father played a huge role in giving her the space and enabling her to continue with the political activism and social activism which had started in her as a young girl.
The strongest points about her was that she looked at the human being as somebody with life, and the life that they had was the most important thing. She looked at people with a lot of dignity. And the ANC, through this period of struggles, where people had to fight for electricity, fight for water, and fight against disconnections. She even took a case to the High Court and challenged it, challenged the government. She was criticized as being a counter-revolutionary.
If we believe that the government of the day has the capacity to deliver, but still will not deliver, then we will inform people about it. And if that is being counter-revolutionary, we will be counter-revolutionary.
Well, this is the main power of Fatima Mir. The only reason a documentary should be done on Fatima Mir, because I can't think of many people who came from deep inside the ANC, who so quickly was able to turn on the ruling class and show them for what they are.
I think Fatima Mir always kind of said, I don't know, it's not these people in the ANC, but it's these deep processes, it's that corruption, that awful sense of crony capitalism taking over public policy, that terrible neoliberal nationalism, which is arrogant and out of touch with the people, that she saw so clearly in Chatsworth when she tried to go and campaign for the ANC in 1999.
Fatima was always critical of the ANC in the sense that she was not happy about transformation in relation to the poor. We hadn't devised programs that actually dealt with the poverty of our people.
South Africa has actually moved from being a racial apartheid South Africa into being more now a class divide, apartheid. So apartheid still exists even today. This gap between the rich and poor is so large that poor people, barely have a voice. So therefore, Fatima Mir, one of the things she's done is given us the strength to really keep our community together, and really stand up and fight for whatever we think is our needs.
We had a political freedom, but political freedom without economic freedom was half the freedom we fought for. And at the time, we didn't realize it. We thought hoisting the flag of freedom was going to solve all our problems. We were just halfway.
I remember once when she phoned Nelson Mandela. I was in her house, and she told him off for what he had done the night before, whatever it was. Now, there are very few people in the world that would have the audacity to pick on a person like that. But she did it in such a way that it was not offensive. She was never vindictive. She was only interested in the truth about everything.
I've always stood for the poor and for the rights of the poor, and I'm standing now again for the poor and for the rights of the poor. And if this is standing against the ANC, then I will be standing against the ANC. Though I must point out to you that all my friends are there. All my socialization, my allegiances, my sort of happiness, my camaraderie, my comradeship for the last, 60 years or so has been there.
Prof. Mir had been extremely ill. She had another stroke and was rushed to the hospital.
Prior to the stroke, she was having heart problems and she had cardiac bypass surgery.
And I remember very clearly the Friday, the children calling me. Shamim called me and told me, that's Fatima's daughter, that Prof was extremely ill and that I should see her. I was being very close to her. They felt it necessary that I should see her, and I didn't want, my inner voice says, don't see her. I didn't want to see her in that state. Neither did I want to see Prof pass on. And I prolonged the day, and every time the children phoned, I said I was going to come soon, I'd leave work soon, and I would visit soon. And eventually left work at normal, 4 o'clock, got to the hospital, and a minute after me entering the ward, Prof took her last breath. Like she waited for my presence to say, goodbye, to leave this mortal world.
The only day we realized what a powerful figure she was in this country and in the anti-apartheid struggle was the day she died at her memorial service. When we had the premiers and people from the president's representatives really talking about her involvement in the anti-apartheid struggles. It was at that point we realized that we were amidst one of the most powerful women in the South African history.
She lived all her life trying to transform society, trying to transform the lives of our people. And I have no recollection of bridges named after her, hospitals named after Fatima, as is usually the case with those people society decides are their icons.
If you go to her gravestone, the inscription on it talks about Ummah, Ubuntu, Tawheed. And these are concepts which denote the universality of humankind, and concepts, I think, which she believed in and embodied so much of who she was.
Her legacy is to realize that we are in this world for a limited period, that there is a lot of injustice in this world, and we must do everything that we possibly can to uplift people from poverty to a better life.
You know, when we started engaging in the beginning, we didn't even know we had rights. So she was very instrumental in actually gearing up us with that, you know, that real weapon. You know, you have the right to do it. It is your right to do it. And once you understand that right, you know, it gives you that power to fight for it.
If Fatima was alive, she would be leading the demonstrations. She would be leading the demonstrations. She would be right there with the poor, and she would be the voice of the poor, as she had always been.
Uniting Indian and African people to find again that possibility of black unity. This time not against a white oppressor, but against a class oppression of neoliberal policy. We miss her because that's so desperately needed right now.
An amazing woman, amazing and rare also, a gem to have amongst us, and she will be sorely missed, especially by me.